Now I'd like to help kick off the premiere of an exciting new comedy show, which you're all going to enjoy for a long, long time, starring Tom and Dick Smothers.
Well, was that it?
Yep, I like to hit 'em hard and get out quick.
Tommy, that's a stupid song. I never heard of it. I don't know where you got it, but it's stupid.
A tape was sent to CBS's censors. Within minutes, alarm bells were ringing throughout the hallways. Instead of the usual comedy routine, the screen was filled with a sharp, bold political message far beyond the limits the network had ever allowed. 6 days later, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour was suddenly canceled without explanation, without a press conference, without a farewell. The tape never aired, but what happened that day changed American television forever. What was on that tape that made CBS so scared? Let's go back to the beginning to understand this shocking story. In the 1960s, American television was controlled by three big networks: NBC, ABC, and CBS. Every night, millions of families sat down to watch carefully chosen programs that followed the safe rules of what was considered proper. CBS was the king of safe television, with shows like The Ed Sullivan Show and Bonanza. But times were changing. Young people were protesting against war and questioning authority. CBS needed something new to keep viewers interested, especially to compete with NBC's popular Sunday night shows. The idea for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour seemed perfect. Tom and Dick Smothers were two brothers who did light comedy. Tom played the silly, childish brother, while Dick was the smart, musical one. CBS thought they were safe enough, just harmless family entertainment. The show started on February 5th, 1967. The first episode was exactly what CBS expected: music, jokes between the brothers, and simple comedy sketches. But Tom Smothers had bigger plans. He didn't want to just make people laugh. He wanted to make them think. Slowly, carefully, Tom began changing the show. Under the cover of humor, he started inviting guests who had something important to say. First came Pete Seeger, a famous singer who opposed the war. Then Harry Belafonte, Joan Baez, Jefferson Airplane, and The Who. These weren't just entertainers, they were artists with messages about war, injustice, and freedom. The show also hired young writers like Steve Martin, who understood what young people were thinking. The comedy sketches gradually shifted from silly jokes to smart comments about politics and society. The show still looked the same on the outside, but inside, everything was changing. Young viewers loved it. College students began quoting lines from the show. For the first time, there was a television program that spoke their language and talked about things they cared about. But many older viewers and Southern TV stations were not happy. They sent angry letters complaining about the content. CBS was torn. The ratings were good, especially among young people aged 18 to 25, but they were losing control of what went on the air. Tom refused to change jokes or remove guests if he thought the message was important. Many episodes had to be quickly edited just before airtime. By the second season, the show was no longer just comedy. It was a platform for ideas that other TV shows were afraid to touch. The musical guests pushed boundaries even further. Jefferson Airplane sang about drugs. The Who played so loud and wild that they broke the sound equipment. Joan Baez dedicated a song to her husband, who was in jail for refusing to serve in the military. The comedy sketches became bolder too. Pat Paulson, a comedian on the show, pretended to run for president. His fake campaign speeches made fun of real politicians by promising ridiculous things like building more potholes to test voters' patience. It seemed harmless, but it embarrassed real politicians because it showed how frustrated people were with politics. The biggest trouble came from David Steinberg. He performed comedy sketches that looked like church sermons. Dressed as a religious leader, Steinberg would mix Bible stories with current events, making jokes about politics and power. This made many religious viewers very angry. In October 1968, several CBS stations refused to air one of Steinberg's sketches because they thought it was offensive to religion. CBS received over 300 angry phone calls and letters in just 1 week. But young people loved Steinberg's performances. Students took notes on his jokes. College newspapers wrote articles analyzing what he said. Bootleg recordings of his censored sketches were passed around on campuses. For many young Americans, this was the only TV show that reflected the reality of their world. The more successful the show became with young viewers, the more CBS worried. They made stricter rules. Every episode had to be submitted 10 days early for review. Tom Smothers often ignored this deadline on purpose, keeping his controversial material until the last minute. Behind the scenes, meetings between Tom and CBS executives became heated arguments. CBS began watching every script and every guest invitation carefully. Dick Smothers found himself caught in the middle, trying to keep the show on the air while his brother pushed harder and harder against the limits. By early 1969, CBS had run out of patience. Local stations were threatening to stop showing the program. Advertisers were getting nervous. When Tom decided to bring David Steinberg back for another controversial sermon, CBS knew the line had been crossed for the last time. In early April 1969, Tom Smothers completed an episode that he knew would cause trouble. David Steinberg was back with a new performance that was more direct and political than anything he had done before. The stage was set up to look like a church with a spotlight on the pulpit. Steinberg came out dressed as a rabbi. In just 5 minutes, he transformed the biblical story of Moses into a story about modern anti-war activists. In Steinberg's version, Moses wasn't just following God's commands, he was following his conscience, like young people who refused to fight in an unjust war. The most shocking moment came when Moses looked directly at Pharaoh and said, "Sorry, Mr. President, but take your army and go. I will not help you anymore." The studio audience burst into applause, but CBS executives saw this as a direct attack on President Nixon. This was exactly what they had been trying to avoid for months. The sketch ended with a folk group singing a song called "No More Promised Lands." The lyrics told young people to stop believing empty government promises and to make their own choices about war and peace. Steinberg threw his prayer shawl into the audience and shouted, "Peace, not war." When CBS received this tape, everything changed. Unlike previous episodes, this one was immediately blocked. CBS said the episode had missed its deadline and violated their agreement. Tom Smothers argued back, saying the tape had been sent on time, but CBS was taking too long to review it. In private meetings, CBS executives, led by William Paley, demanded that Steinberg's entire performance be removed if the episode was to air. Tom refused to make any cuts. On April 4th, 1969, CBS ended their contract with the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. There was no announcement, no explanation to viewers. The next week, the show's time slot was filled with Hee Haw, a safe country comedy that would never cause problems. The banned episode never aired in the United States, but it was shown on Canadian television, which wasn't controlled by CBS censors. Soon, bootleg copies were being passed around American college campuses. Student newspapers analyzed the content, calling it a bitter but worthy goodbye to a show that dared to say what others avoided. The public reaction was split down the middle. Young viewers saw it as proof that CBS cared more about politics than free speech. Small protests happened at CBS offices in several cities, but conservative groups praised the decision, calling it necessary to protect public morals. For Tom and Dick Smothers, the cancellation was devastating. Television offers disappeared overnight. Tom was considered too dangerous to hire. Dick, though more cautious, was also blacklisted because of his association with the show. But the brothers didn't give up. They sued CBS for breaking their contract, claiming the cancellation was just an excuse to silence their political views. The legal battle lasted 4 years. In 1973, a court ruled in their favor, ordering CBS to pay more than $770,000, 0 cents. However, by then their television careers were already over. The cancellation affected the relationship between the brothers, too. Dick later admitted he didn't always agree with Tom's uncompromising approach. He believed that if Tom had been willing to make some compromises, the show could have lasted longer and had more impact. but they remained partners and friends, continuing to perform in smaller venues for loyal fans. The impact of the show's cancellation rippled through the television industry. Many young producers and writers saw it as a lesson about the limits of creative freedom when facing the power of network television. Lorne Michaels, who would later create Saturday Night Live, said that without the Smothers Brothers, there would be no SNL. The show had proven that television could mix comedy with serious political commentary, even if it came with a price. For young artists, especially comedians, the Smothers Brothers became symbols of artistic courage. The censored tapes became collector's items, passed around by students and independent artists like underground treasures. Some sketches that CBS had rejected were later found in writers' personal archives, adding to the legend of what had been lost. Over time, public opinion about the show began to change. What had once seemed dangerous or inappropriate started to look brave and ahead of its time. In 2008, nearly 40 years after the show was canceled, Tom Smothers received an honorary Emmy Award. In his acceptance speech, he said simply, "Peace is harder than war," a quote that has been repeated many times since. In 2010, both brothers were inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame, finally receiving official recognition for their contribution to television history. It was a belated but meaningful restoration of their reputation. The show's political impact was also confirmed years later when it was revealed that Tom and Dick Smothers had been placed on President Nixon's enemies list in the early 1970s. While they didn't face the same direct consequences as some politicians and journalists on the list, their inclusion was clear proof that their show had genuinely threatened those in power. By 2022, the entire archive of the show, scripts, tapes, and unaired sketches was transferred to UC Santa Barbara for preservation. This marked the first time many of the show's internal documents became available to researchers, including some sketches that CBS had ordered destroyed. The digitization of these archives helped reshape the show's legacy for a new generation who had never experienced the era of protest television. When Tom Smothers died in late 2023, social media was flooded with clips from the show, old photographs, and tributes from famous comedians. Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, and Sarah Silverman all mentioned him as one of the pioneers of modern political comedy. They spoke of him not as a relic of the past, but as part of the foundation that made American television more daring and outspoken. Surprisingly, the show began entering popular culture again through the internet. VHS tapes that were once secretly passed around college campuses were now digitized and spreading rapidly on YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, and other platforms. The famous line, "Mom always liked you best," became the soundtrack to countless memes and parodies. A clip of Pat Paulson's fake 1968 presidential campaign, where he promised to solve all problems by waiting for them to go away, has been shared millions of times in today's political climate. Sketches once considered too sensitive are now viewed as classics of thoughtful satire. This rediscovery isn't just nostalgia, it's a recognition that the show was ahead of its time. The UC Santa Barbara archives continue to be explored by researchers, students, and documentary filmmakers. Unaired footage, Tom Smothers' handwritten notes, censored sketches, and CBS response letters all paint a fuller picture of the scale and intensity of the censorship the program endured. Modern comedy hosts have been clear about the show's influence. John Oliver, Trevor Noah, and Hassan Minhaj have all acknowledged how the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour influenced their approach to comedy. Not because of the format, but because it demonstrated that comedy didn't have to be an escape from reality. It could be a tool for engagement and dialogue. In media conferences, the show is cited as part of the evolution of modern critical television. Though no longer on the air, the show's spirit lives on through its quotes, its symbols, and its uncompromising approach to truth-telling. When excerpts from the Forbidden Sermon were shown at a memorial event at the New York Television Festival, young audiences saw the entire banned episode for the first time. Contrary to expectations that it might seem outdated, the content remained sharp and surprising. with a level of directness that few shows dare to display today.